Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. President of Hungary, Viktor Orbán, recently said, today in the Western world there's a civilization-level struggle for something that is called the West. There's always been a great struggle in Western politics, I mean the right wing, those who have remained within the Christian national Western tradition, those who have built political programs on these foundations, and those who have stepped out of this tradition. This is the left-wing progressive world who also have an idea about the world, and the globalists are building their own power system. The struggle has been going on for 150 years in Europe, and now we have to fix this. You know, Orbán's a complicated figure, sort of skeptical about him generally. I find some of the things he's done as the head of state in Hungary problematic, particularly with respect to restrictions on a free press. But Rod Dreher, who's over there and has written somewhat extensively about Viktor Orbán during his time in Budapest, has persuaded me to take a more expansive view of Orbán. Anyway, it's not really about him. It's about what he said here about the fight for Western civilization, which is ongoing and which he sort of intimates Western Europe seems to be losing. Listen to this young girl who was interviewed at a march against asylum houses in Britain. And remember the backdrop here. Keir Starmer, two-tier Keir Starmer, has made all sorts of pronouncements about tightening up immigration enforcement in the UK and repatriating some immigrants that are there. Germany right now, MERS in Germany is talking about repatriating Syrian refugees. There's talk about it in some of these Western countries, but there's a bit of a divide between the talk and the action. And listen to this young girl talk about how she is treated by her friends and within school for participating in marches opposing these asylum hotels underwritten by British taxpayers, and what she wants. Doesn't seem like she wants a lot.
Are you here today?
I'm here to protect the kids and how I have the streets safer for when I have kids. Because I'm scared. Because I'm scared if anything's going to happen to me. Because being a white girl is really scary at this time. Loads of people call me racist for going to these, but I just want to be able to feel safe in my own community, and I just want to be able to walk the streets like my dad and my mum used to without a worry.
Not going to school at the moment. What's happening there?
People are calling me racist at school for going to the marches, and they're calling me far right, but the thing is I'm not far right. I respect everyone's cultures, their religion, where they come from and their background. I just want to be able to feel safe.
I just want to be able to feel safe. And again, this is a country that was essentially denying something that Elon Musk was pointing attention to, that Dominic Green, our friend, did an excellent piece on for the Free Press that drew attention to this, including Musk's, these Pakistani rape gangs in certain communities outside of London. Going back to the story about the BBC we talked about earlier, what the press chooses to amplify and what it chooses to minimize or marginalize, the stories. The stories they want to tell, and the news they're unwilling to report. And obviously, it should be obvious, the analogs in the United States are plentiful, aren't they? More on this topic and other geopolitical matters. We're pleased to be joined by our friend Stephen Bucci, who of course, served in the Pentagon, Special Forces, now at the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen Bucci, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's always great to be on the show. Thanks for having me back again.
So let me just layer in another aspect of this in addition to what's going on in the UK, what's going on in Germany, what Orbán had to say. These terror plots that were thwarted recently, One in Detroit by our FBI, 2 individuals arrested, plotting some sort of ISIS-inspired Bataclan anniversary attack. And 3 young women, like in their late teens and early 20s, arrested in Paris for doing the same, plotting an Islamist-inspired terrorist attack. What is? I don't want to make more of it than it is. I want to be proportional here in terms of these one-offs, or are we seeing a resurgence here? I mean, it's sort of like one of these things we talked about quite a bit after 9/11 and during the height of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, not just about jihadism, but about sort of the quote-unquote multiculturalist policies of Western Europe that had begun to seep into the United States and then were expedited considerably under Obama and then, of course, exponentially under Biden. Where are we in 2025 in the West?
Well, I think what we're seeing is a kind of a cyclical process. We saw great concern after 9/11, not just because suddenly we went, oh gosh, this is a problem, let's address it. It's because the other side, in support of 9/11 and against the post 9/11 response that was coming from the West, you saw more efforts by the radical elements across Europe and in the United States to sort of express themselves violently. We saw it again after the, when Al-Qaeda started going down. There were people who came up in support of their various affiliates around the world. We saw when ISIS reasserted itself, flowing out of Al-Qaeda, you saw another uptick across Europe. And now I believe it's probably connected with Gaza and the Palestinians. They thought they had a winning ticket there. And now that Hamas has been hammered very hard, and there, we have this ceasefire, hopefully trending towards a peace agreement. You're seeing around the world their adherents getting stirred up again. So every time there's some uptick in the radical world, you get supporting actions popping up as well. And the response in the West has always been, well, it's a police issue, let's deal with it. But, don't target anybody else. Don't assume that everybody else who's Muslim is a problem. And that may be true. They're not all problems, but there's significant numbers of people in the Muslim communities around the world that are problems, and they're hiding amongst these other folks. And in many cases, those other folks who wouldn't do anything violent themselves are willing to support, at least willing to look the other way when they see something and know something. Because they're not integrated into their respective societies, they feel no impetus to report it to police or to try and stop these bad people from doing things. And we have that problem here in America. We just had the arrest in Dearborn, and that were supposedly connected with ISIS. It's still a huge problem, and people in the West and in America who wave it off and say, oh, well, this is just a couple of one-offs, we don't need to get too excited about it, are wrong. We do need to be excited about it. We do need to be prepared for it. We do need to put the assets, police and intelligence, and if we're dealing overseas, military as well, into this problem. But there's lots of folks across the West and in America who think if you say that, you're some sort of, fascist thug. Why would you ever say that? Well, I'm sorry. These people are breaking the law. They're dangerous. They're a threat to our society. And if you don't address threats to your society, they grow.
I wanted to get around the globe a bit. Zelensky announced over the weekend that I understand to be him and NATO allies, Western Europe. We're preparing the 20th sanctions package with our EU partners. We expect this package's content to be prepared within a month, and we propose including Russian legal entities and individuals that are still profiteering from energy resources. Okay, 20th package. So how's it going? I don't want to be too flip about it because I watched this interview with an expert in Ukrainian-Russian relations, ostensibly, who claims that power grids are exploding, soldiers are unpaid, talking about Russia, soldiers unpaid, cities running on generators. This guy, Konstantin, says Western sanctions are finally cutting off the oxygen. Oil giants like Rosneft and Lukoil are scrambling for cash. That, Russia is feeling the effects, that the squeeze is happening and it's having impact. But it's really difficult to tell because, of course, Putin doesn't care how many lives are lost in pursuit of conquering Ukraine. That seems to be the overriding problem in this. It continues to be the overriding problem in this calculation.
Yeah, whenever you use sanctions against an autocratic leader like Putin and the regime he heads, the uncomfortable truth is the first people affected by those sanctions are not the bad guys at the top. They're the population in general. And the theory is that if you go after that and you stir up enough dissatisfaction among those people in the street, as we would use that term in the Middle East, it applies in Russia as well, that they will put pressure on their leaders to make change. That's with somebody like Putin, who really doesn't give a flip about what is happening to his citizens or his soldiers or the people in the street. It makes a longer slog to get anything done. That's why you also try and hit the banks and things like that are going to hit the oligarchs and the people around Putin more directly. But it's still not going to cause them to go, oh gosh, yeah, this is bad, let's stop doing it, in a week. So you have to stay at it. You have to continue to look for more potential targets for the sanctions. You have to keep going to keep the pressure on them. But even then, sanctions have, they've worked in other cases, but in a lot of cases they haven't. It's made the people feel good. It's kind of a virtue signal, but it's difficult. If you don't want to go to war with these bad guys, then you have to keep doing this diplomatic, economic stuff. And to be honest with you, it doesn't work as fast as dropping bombs on people.
Well, and I mean, the other problem, of course, is that, the 20th sanction package Zelensky touts with he and his EU partners. Well, his EU partners are still buying energy from Russia. So, yep. I mean, that sort of undermines the sting a little bit.
Oh, 100%. Sanctions, for the most part, historically, if you look across the modern era and their use, have been tragically porous. I mean, there's stuff that people are cheating. In some cases, they're not even cheating. They're using just staying within the rules for those sanctions. They're touted in the press by the politicians. But in reality, if you put a microscope to them or even just a light, you realize, gee, these are not as devastating as our leaders are telling us they are. So I don't know how you change that, Dan. I really don't. It's you have to hope you get leaders on the good guys' side.
Yep. Did we lose Stephen?
That try and do this stuff well and with effectiveness. But again, if people think this is going to change overnight, it's not.
I hate to bring him in because I don't think he's a terribly important figure, but I could be underestimating him. I'm talking about the Marxist president of Colombia, Petro, who keeps sort of running off at the mouth, much in the vein of like a Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, who he's buddies with, along with the Cubans, and I'm talking about the Marxists. The Marxists together in Central and South America. This is nothing new, but he's threatening Trump. Don't wake the jaguar. Talking about any sort of attacks that could come Colombia's way as he's watching the Trump administration take out narco terrorists, mainly emanating from Venezuela, but not limited. This is a guy who's previously said that if we can't change Trump, then we'll have to take him out. Petro, as an individual head of state in Colombia, or at Columbia, because it's really not different than Columbia University as far as I can tell, but in Colombia, and those that he's allied with, that sort of Marxist junta in Central and South America. Like, other than narco terrorism, is there anything else that concerns us about them?
No. If you mean, are they a military threat to us? No. I've worked with the Colombians. I've worked with the Ecuadorians. I had a Venezuelan classmate at West Point. That was before all these dictators were in there. But they're fine folks. They can be really good soldiers. They're not 10 feet tall. There's not very many of them, and they can't get here from there. So no, they have no capability to strike out. Now, if they want to try and assassinate the president of the United States, I guess they can try that. But for all the other issues about the Secret Service, they're really pretty good at doing their job and stopping assassination attempts. So, unless this guy thinks he's actually Carlos the Jackal and is going to come and do something like that, a lot of that is myth. And apparently communist leaders tend to have myths about themselves in their own minds, and most of them have never done jack with a weapon or anything else. So,
although this guy Petro was a member of a terrorist group when he was young, not a kid, but when he was young.
Well,
that's what I understand. Yeah. No, I mean, I understand.
I don't think anybody's shaking in their boots up here.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's more just like it's not so much shaking in their boots about Petro, but it's more like, is there anything sort of neo-Monroe doctrine oriented, which Trump seems to be a proponent of, anything we need to do in the hemisphere other than what the Trump administration is doing when it comes to these assorted Marxist heads of state?
Well, I think what they're doing is a great start. We need to look for other opportunities, not to go slap around every country in Latin America. Most of them are pretty useful partners and good folks. But the ones that are problematic, we probably need to put them on notice and say, hey, look, if you really want to play that game, we can help the people who are working against you. And we can do it in ways that never shows up in the newspapers. So if you'd like us to turn that on, I suppose we could probably do that. Now, one of the problems we have is we have basically a fifth column here in America that don't want this particular president to do anything that might be beneficial, because that then he accrues credits in the mind of the public, and they would rather see America at a disadvantage than see this president get credit for anything. I think that's kind of silly.
Stephen, hello? We lose him? Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll leave it there with Stephen Bucci. Dan Proft, Chicago's Morning Answer.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. It's a bank where